Welcome to On the Sidelines, the show that discusses sports and how sports intersects our lives. I'm your host, Paul McGrath, and I'm glad that you could join us for this show. The lives of today's guests certainly intersect with sports, all types of sports. Our guests are sports reporters in the newspaper and .com communications industry. We are pleased to have with us longtime reporter for the Worcester Telegram, Bill Ballou, and our own Westboro's homegrown Matt Votor, who reports for Mass Live. Gentlemen, welcome.
Paul, how are you?
Good.
Thanks, Paul. Good.
Well, let's go back a little bit before we get to today's reporting and give us a little background on how you got into the industry, and then we'll get into how the industry's changed. Bill?
Well, since I'm the oldest, I
Well,
guess
we'll defer.
As so often happens in life, it was completely by accident. I was working for the school, the Northbridge High School magazine, The Scribe, starting to put out our fall edition. And the publisher, owner, editor of the Blackstone Valley Tribune Advertiser, Jack Snyderman, came up to one of our meetings and said, "I need someone to cover the high school football games this year. Anybody want to do it?" I said, "Okay, I'll do it. Sounds like fun. I get into the games free." He says, "Yes, and you get paid $1." So actually, I covered 9 games, and he paid me $10. He gave me a bonus at the end of the year, so that was good. And then from there, I was a senior in high school. From there, I went to UMass, and I joined the Collegiate at UMass, which was a daily. And we published 5 days a week throughout the school year, and I covered sports there, and that's how I got into it. Actually through the starting in high school, and I wrote my first story for a newspaper in October of 1969. I've been writing ever since, one way or another.
And here we are, yeah.
Yeah.
Addo?
I've kind of known I wanted to do this for a long time. I read the newspaper before my arms were big enough to hold it all the way out. I'd spread it out on the floor and lay on the floor and read it. And I wrote for the Westboro, the Lobby Observer, the high school paper. And then I too am a UMass and collegian person. I got really the prime of my training came at the Collegian, and then I interned at the Worcester Telegram and Gazette, where I met Bill a long time ago, back in the early mid '90s. So and I ended up at the Daily Hampshire Gazette in Northampton after that, and I've been at Mass Live now since 2018.
So I was a stringer for the Daily Hampshire Gazette under Milt Cole.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
I did.
You met through the 1990s. You realize that's the last century. We met in the last century. That's a little scary saying that.
Yeah, you definitely edited some of them on a couple of nights. Edited some of my probably Legion baseball copy over at the Telegram years ago. Yeah,
in those days we worked both as editors and reporters, depending on what our sports were. And as much as I didn't like working as an editor on the desk, it's a valuable insight to how the other half works. You know why editors do what they do. It makes sense that way. So it was a good experience. I'm glad I had it.
Now, to do full disclosure, you guys are the reporters, but I did hear a story, and maybe one of you can tell me if it's true, that somebody was a Pepperidge Farm bread delivery man.
No, I delivered.
Yeah,
but not Pepperidge Farm. I've always been in delivery. My summer job when I was at UMass was as a milkman for Hoods.
As a milkman, I see.
Okay, but then and this is interesting. This shows how much times have changed. I worked 12 or 13 week summer, and I made enough money every summer to pay for my entire college tuition, fees, room, and board. Now nobody could do that today. You couldn't have a summer job that paid for everything, no matter how good a summer job it was.
Right.
And then afterwards, my wife and I got married in 1975. Our wedding was the first day of the World Series in '75. Everyone watched the game on TV. My poor wife threw the bouquet, it landed on the floor. I mean, nobody
watching Louis. Yeah,
everyone was watching Louis Tiant. And a year later, we quit our jobs because I was working for the Amherst Record, and Amherst, it was folding. And we didn't have kids. We quit our jobs. We took 5 months and drove around the country. I came back, and I didn't have a job, and I was about to have a baby. So I went to work, working part-time for the Tribune and part-time in my father's business, which was delivering snack foods, cookies and peanuts and stuff like that. So I had like 2 jobs until the Telegram hired me full-time. So I have been a delivery man, yes.
Yeah, I heard you were delivering Verona cookies, too. Is that true?
That's correct. We had cookies and peanuts and all sorts of stuff.
I delivered, actually. I had one of those if you want, my roots in being paid by a newspaper probably starts with the Globe, actually, because I had one of those 3 a.m. delivery routes that you'd pick up in the morning and then drive on both sides of those. And if you've ever driven late at night and see people on both sides of the road sticking it in the tubes and things, that was me for the Globe for 2 summers during college, and so I too have done the crazy hours in the delivery for sure.
That's from the bottom up in the newspaper business.
Exactly.
I think in the old days when we were in college or whatever, now they talk about spring break and this and people going everywhere. When I was on spring break, that meant I could work more hours.
Yes.
It's a whole different, everything's different.
I used to Tom Sawyer my friends into coming with me like it was going to be a fun time, including your son. Yeah. I used to occasionally get to come with me on some of these runs.
That probably worked once.
Yes.
That's about it, yeah.
So, from when both of you got into the industry, it has changed. I mean, whatever profession you're in, it's changed from when you started. What are the biggest changes that you've seen over the years? I mean, were you the hunt and peck typewriter guy bringing manuscript in?
I'm not that old.
No,
in fact, that's like I took the stage into Boston, the stagecoach, to do the Red Sox.
One was it too? Yeah.
No, it was. I mean, I came into the computer age. Computers obviously have changed greatly. The biggest change, and I tell people they ask what the biggest change is. Essentially, is when I started covering the Red Sox in 1987. My deadline was 11:30, and the games go over at 9:30. Now the deadline's 9:30. The games go over at 11:30.
Yeah.
That's about what's happened. And I mean, you can't really write. The second thing is your access to the athletes and the coaches and the managers is much reduced. There are guys I covered in the 80s and 90s with the Red Sox, managers that I still keep in touch with. And Dustin Pedroia, I covered him for 10 or 12 years. He never knew my name. Not because he was unfriendly, just never had a chance to talk to him. He'd say hi, he recognized it. He didn't know my name, and it wasn't his fault. That's just the way that the business has evolved. Yeah. That's the biggest difference for me.
Yeah, there's certainly truth to that, because there's so many smaller outlets and things now that it's almost every conversation is you, the athlete, and 10 or 12 other people, and sometimes you're asking questions for your story, and other people are just kind of glomming on to get something. It's not nearly as intimate as it was at that point.
I mean, you'll hear radio stuff. Phil, I spoke with Dustin Pedroia. You didn't speak with Dustin Pedroia. You put your microphone in, 10 other people spoke, and you didn't speak with him. No one spoke with him. It's a different thing entirely. But it's entirely different. And I'm not sure why the teams want that. To me, fans, that someone hit a home run, someone drove in a run, but you'd like to know what goes on behind the scenes in their lives. And for some reason, franchises now do not want you to know that. They don't want fans to know what's going on there. And I think that's counterproductive.
Yeah, sometimes I watch the pre or post game. Walk me through the home run. Well, what do you think the guy's going to say? I mean, I can almost answer the questions. Is it really worth it? Is it worth it for you to go down, or? Well,
it depends on the guy. It depends on the guy, and you certainly don't want to not go down the day that somebody does say something.
One day, huh?
Yeah, and there are definitely, you're going to get more things from different guys. Some people are more thoughtful. Some people are more vanilla than others. It's really become, the challenge has become. I used to, and when I covered college sports, I would get a lot of one-on-one access, and so I would think a lot about, all right, the progression of my questions, because I would have something I'd want to get to, but you'd want to get someone talking and thinking and comfortable first before you got to the question that was really at the heart of what I was writing about. So now you might only get one question in if there's a bunch of people, and especially you'll have like TV people yelling stuff over and cutting. Well, I mean, there's currency in the TV business of having your question and your voice heard. Yeah. I don't care if anyone hears my voice. I just want to get the answer. But now, if I have one question for a story, I've got to ask it. I can't build to it or even count on having a follow-up. I better get a good question in right away, or I might get nothing.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like Terry Francona, who I managed coverage for 8 years and we got along very well with, they'd always have these mass press conferences. And he was always trying to be careful of what he said. But you could get him going if you knew the right buttons to push. But as soon as he got going, some PR person, oh, that's it, gotta go. And that's the issue with the coverage today, is you may get a lot of quotes, but you get very little candor. They're two different things entirely. And as Matt said, most of the time it's not worth going down, but in some sense, reporters these days at all levels are like firefighters. You have to be there in case something happens. Right. Most of the time it doesn't, but if it does, you've got to be there. Yeah. And that's just the nature of the business now.
So let's take football, for example, because I know they have the press conference afterwards, and they bring them out one by one. do you ever have access? Can you go to the locker room,
Yes.
or you're told no, you're going here, or how much access is there?
So for us at Mass Live, we have 3, sometimes 4 people at a game, and there are press conferences going on at the same time that the locker room is open. So we will usually have one person in the press conference. Maybe nobody in the press conference if somebody else can be recording it, because you can have access to that in other other ways.
You
So
don't get your question though.
yeah. For me as a columnist, I have to try to find either I'm taking the top of the mountain angle where I'm looking at a really big picture, or I have to find a really intimate angle. So I try to I'll try to find somebody. If, let's say for example, when Rob Gronkowski would talk at his locker, there would be 100 people around Rob Gronkowski. Your arms as a reporter get very tired with this because you're holding your recorder out, like this for as long as you can. So I would try to then look for, okay, if Gronk is talking now, who else is here?
Yeah.
And try to get somebody else,
around,
try to get somebody else, and it gets to the point who's a good talker. Who will have insight on things. And so I would oftentimes look for Matthew Slater, who is a very intelligent guy, has been around for a while and has insight onto the team in general. So if I have a question that I'm looking for an answer to that doesn't have to be person specific, I'm looking for a guy. I'm looking for somebody, or I'll go to try to find somebody that had one play or something that might be interesting. And it becomes for a lot of things, that becomes really valuable, and why we still send guys on the road. There's a lot fewer local media on the road, you can go after a game and get somebody, and you're there with 4 or 5 other people, or 8 or 9 other people, instead of the 30 or 40 that you'd get at home.
Now, does Mass Life tell you you're going to the press conference and you're going to the locker room? How do you guys?
We generally, it's more collaborative than that. Toward the end of the game, it'll be okay. We need to have this, and this covered. What else do we want to put in play, and how can we spread that around? That it's taking the people we have, the people that have been hired. Part of our strengths are our ideas, and try to put those together. So there is a plan, but we're part of making that plan ourselves too.
There can be a real conundrum in who you choose to interview. You can go to Rob Gronkowski, who you essentially know what he's going to say, but everyone's there. Or you can go find some interesting guy who really isn't that significant, but has a lot of interest. So what do you go with?
Well, he's on the field, yeah.
He's not, but what do you go with? Do you go with Pedro Martinez or some reliever? Because Pedro was great. He was unusually articulate. He's not a good example. But do you go to some guy who was the star of the game but says nothing, or do you find someone?
Lester would never
Lester,
say
exactly.
anything.
Do you find someone who has a different perspective, but maybe he's not as well known? I was never sure what readers wanted the same old stuff or something new from someone who's not as good, and I never solved that riddle myself.
Well, I'm a behind the scenes. I want to know,
Yeah, and the players are interesting, especially baseball players. I cover hockey in the winter. Hockey players are by far the best athletes to deal with, by far the best athletes. Baseball players are very difficult. The Red Sox had a guy named Mike Lansing, shortstop, in 2000, 2001, around. The most ill-tempered person I've ever met in my life. But once you get past that, he was very analytical. He'd tell you exactly what happened. He would hate to do it, but he was really good.
The whole play,
He'd play very scientific, but it was hard to get past that facade. And you run into these dilemmas all the time in dealing with athletes. What do you do? How do you get it? Who do you want?
Well, let me read this. Dan Shaughnessy, I read Dan Shaughnessy a lot. This is a quote. He was giving a nice tribute to Pedro Gomez. But one thing he wrote about getting information is he said, "We check with the manager of the other team before the start of every series. We know that you always learn more about your own team by talking to guys in the other room." How do you talk to the? Do you go to the other room? How do you?
If I have time, sure.
Yeah.
And in the old days, I first started, managers before cell phones and stuff These guys had nothing to do. They didn't. You got into the clubhouse 3.5 hours before the game started, and they were sitting around doing crossword puzzles. They had nothing to do.
Yeah.
They were glad to talk to you. Especially, I mean, you're going to talk to Sparky Anderson, and you couldn't shut him up. I gotta go, Sparky. I gotta go. And you would do that. Yeah. Now your access is less limited, but you do try to do that if your schedule permits. If there's one guy covering the game, and if the choice is home or visitor,
right.
you go to the home guy. But when you can, you do that, and you're right. It's like the hockey with the injuries. They'll never tell you what the injuries are. Well, go ask the other team. Oh, he's got a broken hand.
Yeah,
they all
know.
They all know. Sure, they all know. So that is an interesting thing. You really need to be two places at one time if you can be, but you can't. So you have to pick and choose.
Yeah, you can't. It's true. I like to try to think, all right, is there an angle or is there a guy in that other locker room that I want to get? If somebody is interesting. When the Chiefs beat the Patriots in Foxborough 2 years ago, I went into the Chiefs locker room rather than going into the Patriots locker room because the Patriots had owned them in so many important games before that. I knew they would crow about it, and so I figured that was a decent story, and went in there, and they absolutely did, and some of those guys, and so I knew there was a story to be had in there. The risk of going into the other locker room is if you spend time in there and come back with nothing, and at least even boring local, people are going to read that. But if you come back with boring opposing team, you're in rough shape. So you've got to know that you're going to come out with something if you're walking in there.
Yeah, it's like in life. There's two sides to every story, and a lot of times I like to hear the other side of the story. How did they see the play? Why did they do it? People have different opinions.
You know what I miss, and it's happened. It's evolved into no access now, which changed when I started. Was not having access to officials. I mean, right. you like to know why a call. These guys are major league officials. They have reasons they make their calls. They have angles. I'd like to, but now that you essentially have no access at all, and to me that's doing the fans a disservice because there are often questions about officiating, and they can be answered very intelligently by the officials if you could ask them. But they tend to be completely off limits to us for some reason.
I remember back when I'm going way back, Matt. Is Johnny Most? He used to berate the officials, Sid Butcher, but I think Johnny. Back then, they were on radio. His job was to sell the game, get you to go to the game. But now you don't even know who the officials are half the time, or the umpires, or whatever.
I'm not a basketball fan. I remember Mendy Rudolph and all these guys, from Johnny Most.
Johnny Most.
Yeah, and I couldn't tell a free throw from a 3-point play. But yes, I remember that. And the officials were personal. The only umpire in baseball has a personality. I was like Joe West, who's a pain in the rear end.
Yeah.
And so of all the people have a personality, Joe West. But used to know the umpires. I mean, Bill Summers from Upton. I mean, everybody knew Bill Summers. If you were a fan of that era.
Joe West would do a press conference if they let him. He'd do a press conference after every game if they'd let him.
Well, he tried to sell a product.
Yes.
We had a Joe West call back when I was still doing the Sox. My last year was 2018. When they sent a pool reporter down and knocked on the door, and they have an attendant there, and he says, "Hey Joe, a reporter wants to talk to you about something," and his response was, "I can't even say it on the air." It was apparently he didn't want to talk. So, but if Joe's one of those guys, he'll talk when he wants. I want someone who'll talk good or bad. Good or bad. Give me, anyone can talk when things are going well. But he is like the only recognizable umpire out there really now in terms of personality.
Yeah, you're right.
And him and Angel Hernandez.
Oh well, Angel.
Yeah, everyone criticizes that guy, I guess, but they show his calls, and it's like. But anyway, that's.
Well, then the question would be, why is he a major league umpire?
That's I don't know.
If you were a bad pitcher and everybody hit you every time, you'd go to the minor leagues. But it's not quite the same with officials.
Well, but I do know that they do rate the officials.
They do.
I know in hockey, the supervisor of officials is there. He'll go over the game sometimes. I know in football, they have a team that rates the refs. I don't know about. I assume baseball does in basketball. They must.
In fact, baseball, they have umpire evaluators. And one of them is Kevin O'Connor from Oxford, who was a AAA umpire for several years, and you'll see him in Fenway Park all the time. And he's an umpire evaluator. Now he's doing a lot of scouting. He's at Polar Park scouting up and coming umpires. But that is his job, to critique their performance and make suggestions on how to do better. And he's great to talk to. He's very insightful. Remember when in the 2013 World Series when the Red Sox lost a game on a interference play.
Oh, on third base, Will Millbrook, sure.
Exactly. And I remember calling Kevin the next day. He said he had that call. It was the guy the perfect game umpire, the Galarraga
mustache.
Wonderful
Sounds
guy.
like,
It will
looks
come
like,
to me.
Lives in Oregon. Anyway,
we know.
Anyway, he said he had it exactly right. That's
That
exactly
was the
even
call.
though it looks like the wrong call, it is the exact correct call.
Yeah.
And he's very good with that stuff. But he's umpire evaluated. So they're evaluated very
Jim
heavily.
Joyce.
Oh, yeah.
Jim Joyce.
Oh, the
They're-
mustache guy.
they're-
The guy, the perfect
We
name guy.
actually,
Yeah,
Jim
that's
Joyce, we like Jim Joyce so much. He was great to talk to that we actually got to honor him at the writers' dinner one year with a special award for umpiring. We've never honored an umpire, and he got snowed in Denver. He lives
Oh
in
my God,
Oregon.
yeah.
He couldn't get to Boston because of the snow. But Kevin, he got it exactly right, and Kevin's good that way.
But I
he-
think
they do-
that's
they do
why
allow
at
it,
the
yeah.
end of a game, you want access to the officials. Why did you, I mean, he gave you the explanation. Did everyone, I don't remember if everyone else got it at that time or not.
I think
They
they're
had-
afraid that some officials would be. I think they're afraid that some officials would be concerned, would be thinking about having to answer the questions and not thinking about just making the call.
Yeah, right after the game when
and
it's the heat of the moment.
I
yeah.
think I'm guessing that's why they do it, and I think they probably think that would draw more attention to the officiating, which is I mean you saw in the NHL playoffs this year how much the inconsistent officiating became a story topic. It's been an NBA topic for a long time,
forever.
and so
yeah.
I think they would like that too. I think they would like the officials to be like weather. It happens, but you can't control it and move on. I think that would for all the leagues that would kind of be their
It
preference.
hasn't always been that way. I remember when I first started, there was a game in Baltimore, the old Memorial Stadium, and the first umpire was a guy named Vic Carapazza. And a guy obviously made a catch in right field. It was all Orioles right field. Obviously made a catch, and Carapazza called the guy out. And the outfield got all excited, up and down, jumping up and down. And at the end of the game, we got to talk to Carapazza. He said, "Boy, did I ever blow that one!" And I knew it as soon as he started arguing. He never argues. I knew it, but okay, I made a mistake. Yeah. Everyone understands.
I
They're
think
not
if they
perfect.
say
We
they made a
understand
mistake,
that.
yeah.
I don't like replay at all. I think imperfection is part of the appeal of sports. If they're going to have replay, do it in real time.
That's
you don't
what
get
I
to look
said.
at video.
Right.
Do it
Real
in real
time.
Do it in real time. The same way the umpires do.
Is this
Oh.
much?
Yeah, I mean, do you really think that the rules are supposed to be if a guy's leg goes over the bag for a half a second, he's going to be out? I don't really think that's supposed to be. Even football, is it a catch or not a catch? To me, if it looks like a catch, it's a catch.
I don't care. For me, as long as you have, for the replay, if you put a clock on it and say, all right, you have 30 seconds to replay, get as much as you can out of this 30 seconds. If it's not clear to you in 30 seconds, then stick with the original call. As long as it's not slowing the game down drastically.
Well, that's
yeah.
my key, especially baseball. The games take in my opinion, they take too long.
They do.
Take too long. I think hockey and basketball maybe 2.5 hours. Football, it's going to be 3, but it's only one time a week. Yeah. But baseball, I think they're losing fans. Or the younger, they're losing me.
That's one of the issues, and they understand it. They know it. They just can't fix it.
One of the things that, and you've seen this in Olympics coverage right now. In Olympics, between events, when they're doing live stuff, you've seen it in swimming, seen it in a few things. What they will do is they'll split the screen. You'll see somebody warming up over here in a small box. In a slightly larger box, you've got the commercial with the sound on. So you can still, you bring in a pitcher, when you're changing a pitcher, that's when the guy comes out, he's throwing his warm-up tosses. You can watch him in the small screen, but that's when the commercials, I don't need to be hearing the announcers talking at that point. That's time that you're wasting. Having a commercial in between, you can shorten. One of the things that almost never gets talked about with the length of baseball, they've lengthened the commercial time to make more money.
Yeah,
so you can still have the same amount of commercials. Put them in spots where it's slow. You've got picture the mound visit. You can see the guy talking to him. You can't hear him anyway. You don't need to talk about exactly what he's doing. New guy comes in warming up. That's when your commercials are going. And the guy's been throwing. The pitcher's been coming out of the bullpen. He's been throwing for a while. He can throw 3 pitches to the catcher and let's go. And so yeah, I'm a pitch clock guy. I'm for all sorts of things. But some of it is baseball's made this happen itself with the longer commercial breaks. And you can, for a TV broadcast, you can shrink that by doing the split screen.
Well, I know at Polo Park now they have the clock. The
pitchers
on
the minors.
You can actually see the clock.
So now, the whole length of the game, it's an endless topic of debate. They don't have the long TV timeouts for Woo Sox games,
Right.
okay, but the games last as long as Major League games do. The games last 3:10, 3:15. There's more to it than that. It's pace of play. It's players walking out to their positions, not running out. It's just everything slows down. And they're helpless. On the books is that rule where you can't step out of the batter's box. They step out of the dance. So the question is, why don't they enforce the rule? If you're
Yeah,
going to have a
call
rule,
strike, yeah.
if you're going to have a rule, enforce it, or not, or don't have it. It's a mindset, and they've got to. The other thing is, right, what about this hand over the mouth stuff when you're talking? I mean, I'm not sure there's that many skilled lip readers out there that can relay that stuff in 10 seconds.
There are world secrets out there. The world may go to.
I remember Joe Morgan, who's my good friend, the old Red Sox manager, his suicide squeeze sign, he would yell at the guy in third, "Hey, how's your old tomatoes?" And that was the suicide squeeze sign. He broadcasted, he didn't hold it all hang over his mouth. Yeah, it was a simpler world back then, and I think it was a lot more fun, actually, than today.
Well, I think a lot of things were more fun back then. I mean, unfortunately, much of it has to do with money. It comes back to money. They're being paid more money. They're supposed to stay in shape. I don't know. It seems like there's more guys getting hurt now than back when.
Another great mystery. Why, with all the medicine and conditioning we have now, why are more players hurt more often now than they were when they smoked and drank during the games? If someone can answer that question for me, that is the ultimate mystery in sports to me.
If there's one takeaway from this show is that Bill Ballou has supported the bringing back cigarettes and beer from in the dugout.
Everyone was happy with that. I mean, covering hockey. I mean, some of these you talk about these great 50-goal scorers who would, when their shift was over, not after when their shift was over, would go back into the hallway and have a cigarette during the game was going on.
Well, on Facebook, there's all these different groups you have, and they show pictures of Lou Gehrig and Joe DiMaggio. Oh, and the Lou Gehrig I never associated with smoking and drinking, but he smoked, and unfortunately, what happened to him. But Joe D, he did pretty good smoking. I mean, somehow these guys got through it.
I guess the argument would be, since everybody smoked, it wasn't a disadvantage. When other people stop smoking, they're better than you. Then that becomes. But you can't prove that.
You want the Lucky Strike ads back on the wall?
Oh yeah. The Seagram sign at Fenway Park. If you look at the '67 season, those highlights, there was a big Seagram's billboard behind left field, and fans would stand on it during the game.
Oh, I remember that. Yeah,
the big Seagram. Yeah, so that's and Ken Coleman, the great announcer, Ken Coleman once told me that Curt Gowdy leaves to go to become a national broadcaster. They're hiring to replace Curt Gowdy, and Ken Coleman goes in for an audition. And what they do is they would have a filmed inning, and he'd have to do the play-by-play of the filmed inning. And then you had the Narragansett beer commercial where you actually poured the Gansett. And so Ken said, well, I poured the Gansett. Ken, that was incredible. That's the best pour we've had all the time. And he got hired.
Forget about the announcing.
It was the pour. It was all about the pour. The great head and all that, Times have changed. They have changed.
How about reporting on the different teams? Do you see a difference when you go to report on, say, the Bruins, the Red Sox, or Ice Cats, whoever? Or is it reporting? Or do you see a difference in sports?
Well, I don't do as many different sports as Matt does.
Yeah.
I've never covered, actually the only NFL game I ever covered in my life was during the strike when Doug Flutie was playing quarterback for that's the only one. Yeah. I hate basketball, but I have covered, I hate pro basketball. I like high school and college. Yeah. I've covered Celtics games, and I found them to be relatively easy to cover. The players were accessible, the coaches were accessible, and then hockey is great because hockey players are very, very nice and agreeable to talk to you. Minor leagues is even better because I'm the only guy covering them, so there's not 8 other people that are talking to them. And I keep track of a lot of those guys from Ice Cats days, and they tell you everything. One of my favorite, they literally, no matter how dumb it made them look, it's like when they're born or going into pros, they inject you with truth serum, and all of a sudden, I can't lie, I've got to tell you.
And the guy, parents raised them.
That's right. One of my favorites, the Ice Cats had a guy named Derek Diener, big, tall defenseman, became a golf pro in Alberta. Hockey players tend to be real good golfers, So anyway, I walked into the Ice Cats locker room one day, and he had what appeared to be a tic-tac-toe grid on his face. And I said, hey, Derek. He said, oh, you mean this thing on my face? I said, yes. He said, what happened? He said, well, I was cooking out last night, and the steak caught on fire. And I bent over to blow out the flames, and I forgot that the warming grill was still up there, so I seared it into my face. I said, geez, can I use that? And he said, yeah, you haven't had my name in the paper in a couple of weeks. It was like stealing money covering. It is like stealing money covering hockey. It's unbelievable how different, how good they are. So for me, the sports are different because the participants are different.
Oh yeah.
And that's a big. And minor leagues. I mean, talk to guys who covered the Paw Sox when they were the Paw Sox. Access was so good they got to know the players really well back then as well. So some of it's the level you're covering as well.
I think that's been one of the things that's been so tough with COVID is that it's really hard to get to have just a conversation with somebody, and so somebody is much more likely to tell you something if they like you and trust you and just feel like they're having a conversation at some point. And there's been so much done with Zoom and so much done in groups on Zoom that like I've not stood in the same room as Cam Newton yet, and and at some point Cam Newton's a fascinating guy, and I want to talk to him about his love of cigars at some point. I think that's a great story.
Or his hat, maybe.
But but that's not a thing you can do in one question, and so I think COVID really hurt some of that sort of thing because some of those guys are and in every locker room there's really good guys. You're right that hockey guys are just used to it. Bruce Cassidy legitimately said he missed having the reporters around, which is, I guarantee is not true for every sport or even every hockey coach. But they're definitely right now is I feel like that's been missing in a lot of coverage, and I think one of the great.
Well, that's one thing I wanted to talk about: COVID coverage versus the old. Are we back? Are we back yet? Are we still doing?
Still in the middle.
Coverage?
It's not as bad as it was.
Yeah.
But the Patriots camp started today, and there's still a lot of requirements because not everybody's vaccinated. There's not everybody's still figuring out certain things. Baseball is better than it was. I think hockey is going to be close to normal. I'm not sure what they're going to do with basketball yet, but there's still NFL. A lot of people. There's definitely guys on every team that aren't vaccinated. Until they feel like it's not a risk, I think that there's still going to be barriers put up.
I think that they will, most Major League Sports in particular, will use this as a reason to not bring it all back. They'll bring it back partially, but
Yep.
they'll you find that it's being the cookie business. I remember they changed the amount of space you had in the shelves. Okay, well you get it back when we're done. Well, you never get it all the way. It just and then you say you'll be glad you have anything at all, and that's what it's going to come to. You're never going to get it all back, even if things go back to normal. You're never going to get that access all the way back because now they've set the precedent and they can live with it.
The Red Sox interview room in Fenway is now an auxiliary weight room. And there's no place to put those auxiliary weights and so forth. So are they going to? What are they going to do exactly? I don't know. That there'll be questions on that. But at least with baseball, there's some the baseball writers have some clout to improve some of the things. In some of the other sports, you're a lot more at the mercy.
Are you allowed into the Woo Sox locker room?
I've never seen the inside of that.
Never seen
the inside of it. No.
In theory, at some point, yes. But not until COVID is over. Woo Sox interviews are all in the field.
Oh, they're all in the field.
Yes. So you'll see if you're at the Worcester game on any night, you'll see us scurrying down late in the ninth inning, trying to head down there to try to grab the guys.
Imagine trying to outrun Jared Duran. I mean, that's pretty tough.
Yeah, we had a scenario with Jared Duran that Joe McDonald from the Telegram and I are staking out different sides of the dugout to make sure that he's not trying to sneak off the field and not do it at one point a couple weeks back.
But you mean the assumption with this stuff is it all, and this is a separate issue entirely, that it all will go back to normal, semi-normal, when the virus goes away. But there's a distinct possibility the virus is not going to go away. So who knows where it goes from here? I mean, there's just too many unanswered questions right now to make any sort of solid plans or predictions on what the world is going to look like in the coming months and years.
Okay, well, we're going to we've got Bill Ballou here from the Telegram. We have Matt Votor from the Mass Live. We're going to go to pictures from on the sideline, a segment we do. And we're going to go back in time a little bit, get your thoughts on some of these. This was the 1999 All-Star Game. Sure. I was fortunate enough to be there. I took this picture of Ted Williams coming in, which was my childhood really hero coming in. And the next picture that we have was all the players were along the sidelines, and they were supposed to stay there, I guess. And Teddy was there, and
it's like opening the Berlin Wall. You weren't going to get him back. You weren't going to get him back.
There's Teddy, and then the next one is there he is throwing the first pitch of the game in the All-Star. Any thoughts on Ted Williams? You may not have seen. I actually did see him at Fenway. Talk about the icons of sports, whether it be Ted Williams, Larry Bird, whoever. Some of the icons that we have here in New England.
Well, I can start out with Ted Williams. A couple of issues, a couple of observations. In 1959, I was 7 years old. Ted Williams was near the end of his career. And my father took me into Fenway Park. He said, I want you to be able to tell your kids you saw Ted Williams play. That is one of my criteria for the Hall of Fame. That to me is the difference between David Ortiz and Edgar Martinez. I know Edgar Martinez just didn't have that appeal. David Ortiz did. Is it fair? No, it's not fair, but it's a reality. And so that was my first impression of Ted Williams. And then afterwards, Williams was very friendly with Joe Morgan, the Red Sox manager, and he would be in the office all the time. And Williams was a fascinating guy, very, very bright, intense. He was one of those guys who yelled at you, but he wasn't mad at you. He just yelled.
That's the way he was.
That's the way he just yelled at you. Yeah, you're right. You're right. I'm sorry, Ted. And contrasting with Joe DiMaggio, who I saw 3 times in my life. Every time Joe DiMaggio appeared somewhere, he would come out of the clouds. All of a sudden, there he is. What anybody was doing, they would freeze. And you just looked. It was that kind of a sighting.
Apparition, yeah.
That kind of a thing. Joe DiMaggio. Williams was just the opposite. Very, very outgoing. He loved engaging with people and all that. And he was arguably who was the greatest hitter of all time. I don't know, but Williams was awfully close to being. And at age 38 or 39, he batted .388. If he'd beaten out 5 infield hits, he would have hit 400 at that age. An incredible hitter, just unbelievable hitter.
And he lost time at the World War II.
Korea and World War II. Yeah.
He's somebody you think too with his approach to hitting and his was ahead of it so much. You don't know that you could drop any player from any era into today's game, and with the technology, with the training methods and so forth, that they'd be effective. You feel like Ted Williams, it might take a month, whatever. Ted Williams would figure it out because of how intelligent he was about hitting, and so he's somebody. If you could think about all of the resources that are available to a hitter today, the idea of what Ted Williams might have been with those resources himself and with those things that he could have taken it even. He'd either be what he was then now or taken it even that much further.
He was J.D. Martinez without the electronic stuff.
Right.
He had it all filed away in his brain. Another good Ted Williams story from they had a huge wake for him after he died at Fenway Park, and John Glenn was there because he flew in Korea with John Glenn. And I was talking to John Glenn, and that's one of the greatest souls of my life to be able to meet John Glenn, who was even better than you thought he would be. Just a wonderful gentleman, well-spoken, talking about Ted Williams as a pilot. And I said, do you think Ted Williams could have been an astronaut? And John Glenn said, Ted Williams would have been the best at everything he ever wanted to do. He was the best fisherman, the best hitter. He would have been the best astronaut. He was just that kind of a guy. And that struck me from someone who wasn't involved in baseball saying that.
When I covered colleges, I covered a college football game at Kansas State, and landed in the middle of Kansas at a small airport for the game, and immediately rented a car and drove to Kansas City to go to the Negro League Baseball Museum, which is a great thing to visit if you're ever out there. And so a couple of us walked in, and the guy who was there looked over at the information booth and said, "Is that Buck O'Neill over there?" And sure enough, it was Buck O'Neill sitting there. So we talked about a bunch of things. And he wanted to, and one of the things that he brought up was Ted Williams' speech and at the Hall of Fame, to support all the great Negro League players that never got a chance. So to think that he was so focused on his own craft, but had such a view of so many things around him and what was important to the game was as much as valuable as what he brought from a hitting standpoint.
Yeah. When the Red Sox signed Pumpsy Green and brought him up, first thing Ted Williams did was play catch with Pumpsy Green. Yeah.
Teddy went out there.
Yeah, and of course Ted Williams, his mother was Mexican, so he understood being being a person of some color. So he was great that way. A fabulous figure in Boston sports. I mean, maybe the most. You got Bobby Orr, but he's certainly one of the all-time great figures in the history of any Boston major league sport.
Well, to us, Bobby Orr was king of hockey, and I think you have a story maybe of Bobby Orr, not you, your father. Stories your father told you.
Well, certainly, my dad's whole thing with my dad's favorite athlete of all time was Bobby Orr. The great Bobby Orr story in my family was I went to Gary Doak's hockey camp when I was probably 7, 8 years old, and the big highlight for the last day of camp was that Bobby Orr was going to come speak. And so my dad showed up, brought my younger brother, who was 3 at the time, and he kept saying, "Bobby Orr's the greatest guy, greatest player." And so, well, my brother's 3 years old, doesn't recognize exactly what that means. He just thinks he's Bobby Orr. Wow, he's great. So my dad wouldn't buy my brother a soda that day while he was waiting. My brother wandered off and walked over to Bobby Orr and said, "Will you buy me a soda? Because, hey, this is the nicest guy ever." Of course, Bobby Orr had to borrow money from the Bruins photographer. We have a picture hanging in my parents' house of Bobby Orr lifting my 3-year-old brother up to buy him a soda.
Yeah,
that's my Bobby Orr.
That's hockey in general.
Yes.
The greatest hockey player of all time is also the nicest guy of all time. That's I was a Bobby Orr was when he broke into the game, he was better than everybody else by more than anybody else. It's like if the average PGA golfer was shooting 68, Bobby Orr was shooting 58. That's how much better he was than the rest of hockey at that time.
And that's really the best way to compare athletes from errors is how are they compared to their peers? And yes, if you look at some of the guys that Bobby Orr was playing against and some of those old highlights, some of the guys were significantly slower. Mm-hmm. But Bobby Orr came through the same system that they did, and he was what he was. And I thought Clark Booth had a great quote about Bobby Orr at one point. He said, "Humility graces heroism," and I thought the three words. But that was Bobby Orr on so many.
You talked about Hall of Fame and voting. One criteria I have, and you can't do it for everyone, is would I pay to see that guy play? Like when Cal Ripken, I wanted to go see Cal Ripken. That was very difficult sometime in football, a lineman. I'm not going to pay to see a lineman, but those guys. But let's get to the Hall of Fame voting, Baseball Writers of America. How does that work? Are you in it? What is your criteria for that? Because I know there's pros and cons on who gets into the Hall of Fame. Sometimes, personally, I think guys get in that maybe shouldn't get in. I have a high standard.
Name one of those people that's in that shouldn't be in.
I'd have to look.
Because I'm willing to say that most of those people are put in by the Veterans Committee and not by the base. We're hard markers, we really are. I mean, and I'm very, very proud of the way the association voted on this. My own personal thing, and there's used to be 700 voters, but when I first started, there were guys who were 95 years old who hadn't seen a baseball game in 40 years, and they've culled them out now. So you have to be active. In fact, I retired in 2018. I'm only going to vote for 5 years. Once I'm 5 years discharged from the game, I've lost touch with the game.
Well, how do you get into the Baseball Writers? Is it dues paying, or how do you?
Bribery.
Well, that always works. But
it works in politics. No, if you cover a team on a regular basis for an accredited newspaper, you're in. And once you're in for 10 years, then you get to vote for the Hall of Fame.
Oh, I see.
So I've been voting for the Hall of Fame since 1997. And
I don't vote yet. I'm 4 years in, so I've got 6 more years.
But this is why it works so well. As I'm giving up my vote, he's getting his vote, and he's more contemporary. So and when people say about how individuals vote, that's why there's 400 and something voters, because there's a lot of different perspectives, and they all come together to a final conclusion. It's usually a pretty good conclusion. Yeah. So I think most of the guys, like the Harold Baineses, were put in by the Veterans Committee.
He's one. Okay, that's one name. Yeah.
And I don't understand why they have a Veterans Committee. So you play baseball. I even think you should only be the ballot one time. You play baseball. 5 years after you're done, you go on the Hall of Fame ballot. What changes about your career in the ensuing 10 years you're on the ballot? Nothing.
Well, although you look at Curt Schilling, is it what he did on the field or off the field? I mean, how do you?
For me, off the field doesn't matter.
I know, but maybe for you.
But I don't vote for him because I didn't think he was good enough. He was good, but not. He wasn't a guy that I'd buy a ticket to see. He had 3 or 4 good years. Otherwise, he was a middle of the road reliever and this and that. He was a good big game player.
In the World Series.
No question about that.
He's on the stage. Yeah.
But it's I don't even quote Schilling anymore. I think Schilling has transpired to the point where he's disturbed. Did
you vote for Jack Morris?
I did not vote for Jack Morris.
I was going to say, that's the Curt Schilling comp, that a really good big game guy that the numbers don't match up with
just not good enough, and it's intangible. But the classic thing is, you say, that Edgar Martinez Ortiz. I'm going to vote for Ortiz. Edgar Martinez. I don't think anybody from Boston ever bought a ticket to say I want to see Edgar Martinez hit. And that was, I would get emails from Seattle fans. I get one year. I didn't vote for him. He finally got in. And I always would announce my vote in December. He said, I hope you have the worst Christmas ever. Miserable, rotten, lousy one. You get nothing for Christmas. I mean, that's taking it a bit too far. But people do tend to be very passionate about the Hall of Fame thing.
That's tough, though, because I don't know that a lot of people bought tickets to see Wade Boggs. There were guys on that team that were more compelling to see, especially in that era where he was before on base percentage became as embraced as it is now, and he was a great player. Now, granted, Edgar has the DH knock against him that I think probably unfair to a point, but I think there can be guys, especially if you're a terrific player on a team with more charismatic terrific players, it can be hard to you're not going to be the guy people are paying to see because you're being consistently very, very good or consistently great as somebody else with that. There's no. I was a kid during the height of Wade Boggs' career, and there's not a single play I can think of that Wade Boggs made that was, oh my, I have to tell you about this Wade Boggs play. He just did it every game. He just went out there and got two.
He worked on that.
He did.
Worked
2 for 5, 3 for 4. He had so many great games, but I'm not a huge Wade Boggs fan, but he's a Hall of Famer. But I don't know that I would that if I lived in another town, I would have paid to see Wade Boggs play.
Yeah, I know back when Manny Ramirez was with the Red Sox, people would say, well, even if the Red Sox are down 20-0, I'll wait for the 8th or 9th inning if Manny's coming up. I want to see Manny back.
Yeah.
Well, this is another thing, and this is another intangible. There are certain players, and Ortiz is a classic example. If when they come to bat, everything stops in the crowd. People put down their beer and their hot dogs to watch this particular at bat. People would, when Pedro Martinez was pitching, there was a different atmosphere, and that is an intangible. And and that's why we have 400 voters, because all the opinions come together to some sort of a consensus. And it's hard to get into the Hall of Fame. It should be hard to get into the Hall of Fame.
Totally.
Yeah,
I agree.
yeah.
I agree. But I love Ted Williams. Back then, the on-deck batter used to kneel down. It was a very classic pose. Now they're up, and I don't know how the people behind them can see the game. They're up, and Ted Williams and they used to. It was so iconic, that pose.
Yeah.
Those days are gone.
Oh, yeah.
Well, they were studying the pitcher at that point. They didn't have the iPad in the dugout where they could watch what that pitcher had done for the last 3 hitters.
Let's bring up another picture if we can here. This one here is the one I took of a hockey player by the name of Dale Hunter. Dale Hunter made, I think he made Brad Marchand look like a choir boy. He was a tough-nosed player, but I've met him a couple of times, and he is the mildest, meekest person that I've met off the ice. And sometimes the personality on the field or on the ice is different than when you meet a person.
For sure. And hockey players, that's a classic example. Terry O'Reilly once punched a ref in a game. You couldn't meet a more classy gentleman in off the ice. There are a lot of, I don't know, I haven't met Tom Wilson off the ice, but you can certainly look at all of those guys and think that you play a certain way on the Brad Marchand. I have so many people that know that I do Bruins stuff that are not Bruins fans will have all this impression of Brad Marchand. There's no more thoughtful person about what he's saying, and they'll tell you in the Boston Children's Hospital there's nobody that's better over there than Brad Marchand. But if anybody from another city hates him, in the hockey, I think that's true a lot.
Oh yeah, and you get to know the enforcers, the tough guys, really well, because you're talking to them all the time because they're in fights, and they're suspended, and they tend to be the gentlest people. I wonder, there's going to be some psychological component. They take out all their aggression on the ice when they're there, and there's nothing left. But they tend to be just the nicest guys in the world, and that's the Marchand thing. And Marchand's not an enforcer. Marchand's just a good, tough player, But they tend to be that way. It's interesting.
Different personality. I play golf, and I think when you play golf, you can get to know people pretty well, what they're like. Phil, would you mind telling the story about learning about people? I read this, I think, but I want you to tell it. Game 7, 2004, Yankees, Red Sox, you're rushed to get downstairs, and the person on the elevator.
That was 2003.
I'm sorry,
that was
2003.
The Aaron Boone game, the Aaron Boone game.
Can you?
Oh, yeah. So anyway, have you ever been to the old Yankee Stadium, Matt? Okay. They had 2 elevators from the press box downstairs. One was for the VIPs, and if you, by mistake, if you'd never been there before and you stepped into the elevator, you'd have the cuffs on you and be in the tombs before you even knew what your name was. So we all made sure we used the press elevator. And obviously a Yankees, Red Sox, Game 7, ALCS, there were a lot of people that covering the game. And we had to go down the elevator, the press elevator, in shifts. I think I was in the 3rd shift. And, Grady Little wants to get the hell out of there as fast as he can. His life is just passed in front of him, and so do the players. And so we all want to get down there as fast as we can. And we cram into the elevator, and the door begins to close, and all of a sudden, one more person crams in, and now the door won't close. And it won't close, and it won't close, and it won't close. And the guy is Trump. Trump is the guy who we can't, and he has his own elevator 3 feet away. But he's using us, and the doors won't close. And finally, some writer had to get out. Because Trump, I will say this, the man has an iron skin. The names we called him, you can't believe, you can't imagine. I mean, people invented terms.
And you're trying to get down.
They're trying to get down there. And finally, another way to get off is we could go down there. And because of that, we missed some of the post-game interviews. But that told me a lot about him. He just didn't care about anybody else's job, or the fact that he had his own elevator that he could have taken on by himself. So that was a very telling moment. If you had told me at that moment that someday he'd be president, I would have blown my brains out right there in the elevator. But that was that is a memorable moment. There's 3 presidents I've met. Him before he was president, George H.W. Bush, the first Bush, who threw the first ball at a Red Sox game in Baltimore, and then George W. Bush, who owned the Texas Rangers for a while, and at that time. The owners were trying to fire Fay Vincent, and they eventually fired Fay Vincent. And George Bush was a big Fay Vincent proponent, and he took us out to lunch to try to talk us into supporting Fay Vincent, which we did because he was in Boston all the time. He was a wonderful guy to deal with, great for the media. And so he took us all out to lunch at some restaurant in Arlington, Texas. A very nice, very pleasant guy. I never dreamed he'd be president, but it was much different than the Trump experience, I will say that. And they've all been Republicans. I don't know why that is.
All right, we got a couple more, and we've talked about some of this. We're talking about the umpires. And this is a very good umpire from, went to Worcester State, grew up in Oxford.
Steve Palermo.
Steve Palermo. Unfortunately, he tried to help someone and was shot. That was Steve Palermo. There's Carlton Fisk at second base. And another official I get to know, Gordy Dwyer, he did the finals for the NHL this year. And we're talking about the refs and how they can affect the game. And one thing, Gary Bettman, Timmy Peel, good ref, told it like it was. He had to do a makeup call, and they retired him early. And one of Bettman's comments was, well, betting is going to come in. We're going to make legalized betting, and we got to make sure the game is elevated. Well, the game should be elevated. Betting is coming in England, you can bet, which turtle goes across the street first. But what effect does that have on you people? Do you think now they're going to have to say what the injuries are? Because if people are betting, they're going to say, well, we have to know everything now. Do you think betting is going to have any effect?
I think that is an interesting question for hockey, especially because hockey, they're particularly, they obfuscate in hockey more than almost any other sport. I think that is going to be a question mark. I'll be curious to see how they deal with it. As long as it's consistent, the bettors can.
Well, that's what you always ask for, yeah.
So if you're saying, all right, this guy has. The NFL has the whole questionable, probable, doubtful, and that at least gives you some indication. I think you'll probably see something similar with hockey. I still don't think they're going to tell you exactly the body part because they're afraid that the Tom Wilsons of the world are going to come hack at that body part. So I think you'll get a feel for whether that guy is likely to play and maybe at what percentage.
Yeah, I mean there'll be shades of gray with this because you have essentially in every major professional sport, as the season progresses, guys play with varying degrees of injury and hurt, but they can still play. So is this guy compromised but not so compromised he can't play? That's still that comes into a game as well. And I'm not really sure how you're going to factor that in.
Yeah. Or a guy can go out for 2 or 3 shifts.
I mean, you just don't know. I mean, Tuukka Rask was somewhat compromised during the playoffs. To what degree? I mean, and I'm just not sure how it's all going to affect. It's very complicated. It's much more complicated than I can deal with at my age. I mean, this is tough for me to all these changes. I still wish the goalies didn't wear masks. So that's how far back I go.
I don't know how many goalies would have.
You want cigarettes and no masks.
I once asked one of the Ice Cats goalies, Sharks goalies, how much would if I were an owner, how much would I have to pay you to not wear a mask for the season? He said, $5 million because that would cover the medical bills. So, yeah, it's not going to happen. But I saw games where goalies didn't wear masks. I remember those days. They were tough.
Well, I can remember Eddie Johnson. In warm-ups, they hit here, went up there, he's bleeding, off he went. Stitch him up. Back he comes.
You got time for another goalie?
We got time.
So my wife and I, our first date was a Providence Reds AHL game, December 4th, 1970. I remember the date. I still have the program. I knew. I said, I think I'm going to marry this girl. Anyway, so I was a big Reds fan before they had masks. And they had a guy named Marcel Paillet, who was, my email was vet goalie. Marcel Paillet was a veteran goalie. Everyone called him, that's my vet goalie. I saw a game against Hershey where the Reds are ahead 4-2, and Paillet takes one like this, and off they bring him to stitch him up. They bring him back out. 2 minutes later, he gets one here. They bring him off. You know how when guys get hurt, they'll put their arms around the teammates, they'll help them off the ice.
Oh, yeah.
That's how they brought him back onto the ice, because they didn't have a backup goalie. He held onto the crossbar for like 2 minutes. They scored 2 goals out of the game. The game ends in a 4-4 tie. Now that's tough.
Well, I think we're a very common bond here because my Mary Beth, my wife, who I am now married to, our second date was to the Boston Bruins, and she didn't know hockey from anything.
Yeah.
But she fell in love with hockey.
Did the Bruins win?
Oh yeah, but we had a guy named Bobby Orr. I told her just watch number 4. He's
Oh, yeah.
supposed to be pretty good.
Oh yeah.
And here we are.
That's good. Works. Hockey's the way to go. This won't be like the Woo Sox game where the woman ran away when she was on the marriage proposal on the top of the deck.
Oh, I didn't know. I didn't hear that.
I'm
Yeah.
still not convinced that
Oh,
wasn't
yeah.
staged.
I don't know. I mean,
Is she still running?
I always thought that somewhere someone's going to say no to one of these
Yeah.
proposals. I'm sure that's happened before. And afterward, the woman said, "I didn't want to embarrass you in public," but she took off like she was being chased by coyotes.
Maybe that's the last time the Woo Sox do that one. Oh, just they better make sure before.
They got a ton of publicity for that. The Woo Sox
Oh,
are
did they?
thrilled.
How did
That
they
it's
do
the
it?
best thing that happened. Everybody's had the accepted proposals. It's the
Yeah.
rejected proposal that gets you extra attention.
Yeah.
All right, I need your professional opinions on this. I've seen this. I've had it. We had George Summers on the show, race car driver, passed away right after the show, really. But his father was Bill Summers.
Bill Summers, yeah.
And we're going to show this, and then I'll give you my opinion. I want yours. This is the last time the World Series started in September was in 1955. Whitey Ford, Hall of Famer pitching. You got Yogi Berra, Hall of Famer catching. You got Jackie Robinson, Hall of Famer on third, and then Upton's Bill Summer behind the plate. Here we go.
With pinch batter Frank Keller at bat. Robinson dashes to the plate. It's close, and umpire Summers calls him safe on the daring maneuver. But Yogi Berra doesn't think so.
So people are saying you've got difference of opinions. You see it. Whether he's safe, he's out. He'll never forget. But anyway, my thinking, I want your opinion, is if the batter had swung, Yogi's head would be in left field. Catcher interference. True, false? Any opinions from my compatriots here?
You're asking, would it have been catcher interference had Yogi swung?
No, had the batter swung.
That's what I meant. Had the batter swung.
I mean, Yogi interfered with the whole play. I mean, I don't know. Was he safe out? Anybody have an opinion?
Well, first it's interesting because I talked to I did a story on Bill Summers about 3 years ago,
Oh, yeah.
and it was a great story. I talked to his grandson, one of his grandsons. He had a big family, who told me that he went to a baseball card show Yogi Berra was at, and Yogi signed it, and he said, "Who should I make this to?" I don't know if it was a Summers, one of the Summers boys. So and Yogi said, "Really, to the umpire Summers?" And he said, "Yeah, he's my grandfather." And Yogi said, "That damn son of a bitch!" And he started yelling all over again about that. He was out. He was out.
The Yankees won the game. Yeah.
But the second thing about that is watch Bill Summers, how he reacts. They're screaming at him. He just turns his back and walks
right.
away.
He just
no
said,
confrontation
"Yogi, go
whatsoever.
get your pop, go eat pasta." Yeah.
It's great umpiring.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I'm not sure if the rules of engagement change on a steal of home for the catcher. The catcher has to have the right to try to tag the batter out.
But doesn't the batter have the right to hit the ball? I don't know. We need an umpire.
Yeah,
I guess.
it's a good point. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. I think it's one of those rare times that you see the guy trying to steal home with a right-handed hitter.
Yeah.
So many times that's a lefty hitter, so everybody has a clear view of everything in that situation. So because otherwise, when it's the right-handed hitter, he can stand in there until the last second to obscure that. Yeah, it's a. I don't think it would be, because I think you've got to give him a chance to do it, because otherwise you really set up in a situation where the offensive team can attempt to produce a catcher's interference in that situation. I think you've got to give the catcher the opportunity.
I think this goes back to the World Series play in 2013. I think that the defensive player always has the right of way in things like this.
But what if it's a squeeze play? I mean, the runner's coming down, and the batter wants to. I don't know. I've seen guys. Yes, he's safe. He's out. I've never heard about catches.
I think there's an on the sidelines to be done with an umpire here.
I'll ask Kevin O'Connor when I see him.
I need that answer.
I'll try to find out. I'll ask Kevin about that.
Yeah. And I have heard that Yogi was adamant about this.
Oh yeah.
And they won the game.
It's like John Elway in the Stanford band play. He's still mad after all these. He's still furious after all these. This is why I don't like replay. If there was replay, obviously that play should have been blown dead early on. But you wouldn't have one of the greatest moments in football history. I don't like replay. Humanity is part of the whole equation. It really is. I don't like perfection. Sport, that's one of the great things about sports. It's imperfect.
Yeah, it is. Well, I guess this show may be imperfect. Anyway, Matt, Bill, I want to thank you for coming. We've had a great time. Matt Votor of Mass Live, Bill Ballou, a long-time Worcester Telegram. I want to thank you for watching. This is Paul McGrath saying, thanks for watching, and I hope to see you at the game. And if you're not in the game, I hope to see you on the sidelines.